Well, hello, Pip. It is so great to welcome you to the Red Hot Truth. You are still the coach with the best hair in the industry and the best laugh. It's amazing. Is it 20 years now that you've been running a business?
Right.
So, such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so pleased that you're here with us today. And I'm really excited to tap into your wisdom for our audience, especially now, because as I've shared, I'm really excited about this time because, especially for us women, like conscious women, because I think it's just opened up a space for us to step into. And yet many of us are sort of going, that's great, but what now? You know?
Yeah, what do I do now?
No. So it's so great to tap into your expertise. What I do really want to start off with, because I remember you sharing the story at your events, and I really wanted to share with the audience is it the 22-year spiritual apprenticeship you had?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, when I was 19, I was suffering from really severe depression because of the abuse that I experienced as a child from 4 to 8. And then my father dying when I was 9. So these were the big sort of traumatic events in my childhood. And by the time I became 19, that had really developed into a full-blown suicidal depression. And at that time, a young man, he was 18, he said to me, Pip, it's like there's two of you. There's this bubbly external personality, and then there's something deeper where there's a lot of pain. And then underneath that, I think there's something amazing, but I can't reach that. And I don't have the expertise to assist you with that. But I think my spiritual teacher does. So I went and met this spiritual teacher of his, and that began a 22-year spiritual apprenticeship where I went through the 22 archetypes, which I now call the 22 principles of success, love and happiness. They're sort of translating it into something that people can understand and use really easily. And that was really like an old-fashioned apprenticeship that, a yogi might take someone through, except it was with the Western mystery tradition. So rather than the Eastern yogic tradition. So it was really going there, and I would do domestic tasks, which I'm not very good at.
Not me.
I would look after her children. I'm much better at that, and homeschool and all of that stuff. And in return, she would teach me this, what was then secret wisdom. And virtually every day, except when I was overseas or involved in something else. And so it was very long, a very arduous experience. And, from my teaching background, I was like, okay, well, I'd like to share this with more people, but, people don't have 22 years to swap domestic tasks.
Right.
So I wanted to make it more available, and that's what I spent the next 20 years doing, was translating that into coaching tools and techniques and combining it with NLP structures and coaching models to create something that was really applicable and practical for people in everyday use that they could learn in a seminar setting.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember you saying that when you discovered NLP and you could clear things really quickly, you thought to yourself, what is going on? I spent 22 years doing this, and NLP just clears things so easily.
Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced. So, I could clear anger, sadness, fear and guilt, in a 10-minute process. And it was really powerful, and I really loved that. But what happened for me was that I did NLP in 2000, late 2000, and then really early 2001, like in January, I'd already seen what I saw as holes in the technique or areas of depth that I felt could be done more effectively. And so I started to create matrix therapies at that time, particularly to deal with grief, because NLP at that time didn't have a process I thought was robust enough for dealing with deep grief that people were going through. So I started to create this process. I set up a successful company. All of these things happened really rapidly. And then when I co-founded the Australian board of NLP, And I talked to other people because I was so busy in my own business and talking to students and clients and everything. I wasn't really around other people who were, teaching NLP. And when I came around those people, I just started to realize this was not a common experience to set up a business, within only a few months of learning the techniques and for it being successful for the next 20 years, and really run just by myself and, sometimes a part-time personal assistant, at that time. That it wasn't normal. And I started to go, okay, what's different then about my experience with NLP and other people's experiences? And also too, people would say to me in my seminars, when you're doing a demonstration, I can see you're doing the technique, but you're also tapping into this intuition. Like, what's that? I would like some of that. Like, how do you know these things? How come you have this deep intuition? How do you understand that? And at that time, I sort of felt like, okay, I'm doing people a disservice if I don't teach them also these other tools that I've learned and that I was combining into matrix therapy. So a lot people had the benefit of matrix therapies that had those tools in it and that wisdom in it. And then people wanted to learn more directly those tools. So I started teaching that under an umbrella called archetypal coaching. And it was really popular and people really loved that and felt like it filled in those gaps and brought in a spiritual element without it being religious, into NLP, that there was a deeper emotional aspect, a more profound emotional aspect with the matrix therapies and other tools. So people really just loved that, and that became a major part of what my offering was and point of difference was for people. And then we started to use it to help people find their passion and purpose as well.
I love that. I love that so much. And it's just, I was even thinking, say, 20 odd years ago, and I'm not sure because I wasn't here in Australia, the spiritual consciousness movement wasn't as mainstream as it is now.
Yeah.
And so to be gifted that opportunity to learn about things like mystical wisdom is really a gift, because it is, it's really, as you say, an essential part of what we do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, when I learned, it wasn't through the human potential movement. It wasn't through, what people think of spiritual courses. It was really an ancient apprenticeship. This is a very different style than what we are seeing now. And also even now, I think sometimes what happens to people is they go and do a spiritual course and they have a lovely time in that spiritual world. But when they come home, they don't have practical tools to apply that in their daily life. And then they've got these practical tools over here that they apply, but those tools don't have so much of a spiritual dimension. And what I was really passionate about was to bring these two worlds together in a way that was practical, that was easy to understand, even for people who had a very rational thinking mind.
Yeah.
It to be robust enough intellectually that people could really understand it, as well as having that deep emotional clearing, but as also just being a practical tool that you could use every single day as part of your goal setting. And that was really what I wanted to do. I wanted to create this middle path, bridge the gap between these two disciplines, marry the masculine and the feminine approaches together to really create something that was appealing to everybody.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I feel that that's probably one of the reasons for your great success, is because you do marry the two. And I also, as you say, I agree with you. These days it's so easy. There's so many programs you can do, and they're all very feel-good programs. You go there and you feel amazing, and you walk out and you're like, I am taking over the world. And then life happens and it's just the same old, same old. So it's such a beautiful way to equip people to create the life that they want to lead. And so I just read a blog on the website, and I thought, because this is a time of creation for us, I thought, well, why not use the strategy that you put on the website about the structure to creativity? And I thought we could look at that. Is that the right thing? Do you remember that blog, Pip?
No, I
don't. No problem. I will guide you through your own work.
So much stuff, and then I can't remember what I've written.
It's fine. It's fine. I wanted to sort of make this as practical as possible, because I find with things like matrix systems and archetypal coaching, it's difficult to just explain. So I thought, well, how about we just look at the structure to creativity? I thought I'd use myself as an example. So what I did at the beginning of this year, I sort of said, my ambition has for many, many years been to get paid to travel the world, to speak, to inspire. And that I have been hiding, and which is interesting because I've done the coaching and I've done all of that, but I was still hiding. And I came out and I said to the world and to the audience, I'm going to launch a Blossom campaign where we come out of hiding, where we live our truth, find our truth, live our truth, and blossom through that experience and create what we want to create. And I thought this would fit in so beautifully with that. So the first step in creativity, as you say, is vision, like creating a vision. Now this, as I'm sure most of the audience will agree with, and that's a fleeting statement, how would I know? But I would like you to agree with it, is that, I know how imperative a vision is. I mean, I know it gives me direction and focus and just drives me forward, or pulls me forward towards it rather. And yes, other than the statement of get paid to travel or to speak, to inspire, nothing other than that has ever come. I haven't developed that anymore into a vision. And I know that many people I've spoken to have the same. They just have this idea, but they haven't developed it into a vision. So how can we do that? How can we develop a vision?
Okay, well, I think the key thing is that whatever you create a vision on must be something that inspires you. And sometimes as we've become adults, we're sort of taught to be sensible. And we do need to be able to create practical applications. But I think we need to also be able to glean the inspiration from the things in the past that we loved. So one of the things that I often think about is in terms of finding inspiration, in terms of finding vision, is, what are things in the past that I really loved? So, for example, I used to want to be an actor, and I had this idea of, what do I love about acting? And one of the things I loved about acting was the variety, that I could do a lot of different things and, do a lot of, have a lot of different ideas that I could apply. So it's not so much acting that is the thing that's inspiring me. It's the meaning I get from acting. And one of the meanings I get from acting is, what do I love about the idea of acting? It's that I can have a lot of variety. Then what's something else that I love about the vision or the concept of acting? And it's the creativity, being able to dress up, being able to be creative. And then what else do I love about the idea of being an actor? And one of the other things I love about it is that it's magical. So these become three major concepts. So if we sit back for a moment and we ask you, for instance, what do you love about the idea of being paid to travel the world? What's one of the things that you love about that?
Or like your variety, variety, adventure. Getting to experience different things, different people, freedom.
Okay, I'm going to write these things down. Okay, so this is beautiful. So you like variety, you like adventure.
Yes, I love people as well. Being with people.
A different category. In a minute, adventure and freedom.
Freedom. Mm-hmm.
So we would call this category. We would call the innocent adventurer. It's an archetypal category. So we want to make sure that when you start to develop your vision, that you ensure that this vision encapsulates this idea of variety, adventure, and freedom. And like say at the moment, you know, you can't actually physically go and travel to those places, but you can still travel to those places in your mind. You can still travel to different places through education. You can still travel to different places by what we're doing here. You know, we're connecting from different countries, different areas of Australia. You know, these are all things that we can do. So we want to now make sure that this becomes a part of your vision. And now the vision is getting populated. So now the next bit of what you were talking about there in your vision, what you said something about people.
Oh, yes. I mean, I love being with people. People really energize me. And I feel I have the knowledge and the gift and the way to be able to communicate something that inspires people, you know? So that brings me great joy. And I love feeding of people, like that emceeing stuff. Yeah, I love emceeing because I love feeding of people and that real joker kind of archetype. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we call the Joker archetype all part of that innocent adventurer aspect. And we've got another archetype that's emerging here, which is really important for you. And that is the concept of, we call this archetype the creative nurturer. You know, the archetype that loves to connect, loves to communicate, loves to create things, loves to, listen to other people's ideas and bounce those ideas off. But it's about the connection that's happening. And I imagine, you know, because this archetype has other aspects that are important to it, you know, this archetype loves for people to be able to be healed, for people's emotions to be respected and listened to. So this is all aspects of this archetype as well. So we would say then that in your vision, first of all, we want to populate it with this innocent adventure, you know, this fun, going out there, joker, you know, these are all subtypes of the innocent adventure. But then we also want something that is nurturing of people, which is connecting with people, that is creative, that's bringing ideas together and giving birth to something. So, you know, you've got the ideas, that's one category, but giving birth to those ideas in a creative way, that's a different category. So now when we start to look at your vision, we're populating it again. It needs to have ideas and adventure, but it also needs to be people connecting people together and maybe an aspect of that's, you know, talking about emotions and healing and helping people, but also connecting so that ideas are greater together than they are just by themselves. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. When you say populating, does that mean just sort of fleshing it out? Is that what you mean by populating?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, like your vision here is traveling the world. Can you say it again for me, traveling the world?
Yeah, it's to get paid to travel the world, to speak, to inspire.
Yeah, to be paid to travel the world, to speak and to inspire. And the question really here that people have a problem with is, well, how? In what way am I going to do this? So when we're looking at this populating, we're starting to find what are some of the different ways that you might do this. So whatever it is for you has to have a lot of variety in you, it has to have a lot of adventure in it. So then after that, once we get these different aspects, we can then have a brainstorm off this and go, okay, what are some of the ways that I can travel the world, you know, connecting with people and inspiring and getting paid? But what are some of the ways that can ensure that there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of adventure, and there's a lot of new things? And now we can brainstorm around that concept. Do you see?
Yes.
You could just as easily pull out travel and you could go, you know, what are the different countries I want to travel to? But really the travel, the meaning you're getting from the travel is adventure, newness. So each of these words has, you know, in NLP terms, semantic packing, you know, they have a meaning, and we're wanting to unpack that meaning and then pour that meaning back in to flesh out this vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. So to unpack the meaning, and then what do you mean to put it back in?
Well, in a minute we'll see that. So let's just finish. So we've got, you know, you're inspire. Inspire is a key word of this innocent adventure archetype. And we had you being paid to travel the world, to speak to people. Is that right?
Yes, to speak to inspire, yeah.
To speak to inspire, yeah. So the speaking to people, that's part of your connecting with the people aspect. So that's the communication, you're connecting with people. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes.
And really in this vision here, that's the two archetypes we've got. But if we find out a little bit more about you, we could probably find some other archetypes that we could invest in this. But let's just take these two archetypes now as an example. So now we're just looking at, what are all the different ways you can have an adventure? So you can have an adventure by connecting with a lot of different people. So this podcast forum is a really great forum for you because it gives you so much variety and it sits with this connecting with people.
It does. Yeah, that's why I love it. And saying that, what I'm telling myself is that I prefer connecting in person than online, but I mean, of course, circumstance.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. But when we're looking at all the different variety of ways you can connect, just because we connect online doesn't stop us connecting in person.
Yes, I hear you.
As well. And so what we're looking at is we don't have to dismiss one part, because we're wanting to, have other parts. We can sort of look at this variety of different ways that you can connect and be sort of traveling in the ether. So when we're looking at your thing, you've already actually populated this. So there was a part of your mind that was like, but how? But you're already doing it.
Am I?
Well,
you said I've never realised that, right?
This is a forum that you've got. So, it's interesting that for some reason your mind hadn't connected that vision with you just doing this here, right now with us.
Amazing. No.
But that's actually part of your vision. So your unconscious mind has already, fulfilled this vision for you in one way. And this is one of the ways it's fulfilling it for you. So then it's like, what are some other ways that you might fulfill that, whether it's now or in the future, whether it's in the physical isolation that we've got now, or whether it's in the future when this no longer exists? What are other ways that you're fulfilling your vision?
Well, I'd like to do live events where you bring people together and do panel discussions and live interviews. I'd like to, as I said before, MC events. That's like the kind of things that I'd like to do. That's sort of where I'm at. That's all I've got.
Cool. And you have done live events too, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
And that's part of the community that's come here. So in fact, whereas before you were sort of feeling like you hadn't fulfilled this vision, in actual fact, you've already been fulfilling this vision the whole time. You've been running some live events. You've been, training people in those events. Part of your vision of traveling the world might be a lot bigger, but in actual fact, you have, I imagine you travel somewhere to present your live event.
Oh, yeah, I've traveled heaps.
So in actual fact, it's very interesting that you felt like you hadn't been fulfilling this vision. In actual fact, you've been fulfilling it the whole time.
And it's so interesting that you say that, and I wonder if the audience can relate to this, is that because I look at people that I enjoy, I enjoy Graham Norton, for example, and Oprah Winfrey, and I enjoy them for the qualities they encompass, and I suppose I look at that and go, that's what I want. It's so big. And what I have seems so insignificant to what I want, and therefore I feel like I'm not fulfilling the vision.
Yeah, and I think what can happen then is it creates a disconnect between the vision, which you feel super inspired by, and where one is now. But when we realise that in actual fact you are currently building a bridge, and your vision doesn't say like Oprah Winfrey.
I'm Oprah, right? I'm me. So I don't want to.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And of course, when Oprah started, she wasn't the Oprah we think of today either, So I think what we want to be able to do is to go, okay, this is my vision. And in actual fact, I am fulfilling it, and I'm fulfilling it really well. And now really what it is about is not about, I haven't done anything towards it. It's about how can I grow what I've currently got, and how can I reach more people? And that's really a very different question than why am I fulfilling my vision? How come I haven't started on my vision, when in actual fact you're actually, as far as your unconscious mind is concerned, with this particular vision, you've already fulfilled it.
Well, that's so interesting, Pip, and I wonder how many of our audience. This is why I love this practical stuff. I was sitting at home going, oh, I have this grand vision, but I'm getting nowhere, and it's creating this overwhelm and frustration. And what I really picked up from what you just said was asking a different quality question. So I know that questioning is such an important technique. So, like, what are empowering questions that we can ask ourselves when we're looking at fulfilling our vision?
Yeah, well, I think it's really, really important, first of all, to say, what aspect of this vision am I already fulfilling? Because that does celebrate and create that gratitude for where we are now, which the unconscious mind always loves, because then the unconscious mind feels rewarded for the effort it's already put in. It's a little bit like having an employee who's doing a heap of things, and then we're constantly saying, oh, but you're not doing enough. And the employee feels like, man, so much you don't recognise any of it. Where's the motivation then to keep doing more? So I think this first place of just honouring all the work you're already doing, all the people you already inspired, all the people like myself who love to come and be interviewed by you. And that is a tremendous platform for us to reach people we'd never have met before or reached before. And our gratitude towards you that you are actually doing your vision. And that creates a sort of a settling inside. It stops that overwhelm. And it's like, yes, now it's just about building on something I'm already doing, which is also a lot less overwhelming, a lot less frustrating than, oh gosh, how come I haven't done this yet? Yeah. And how come I'm not where I want to be yet? Those sort of questions. It just becomes, first of all, what about this vision am I already fulfilling? Wow, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Wow, good on me. Thank you. I've been going ahead and doing that no matter what, inside the limitations I've experienced, inside, the time restrictions, the family, the this, all of that. I've actually achieved and been living my passion and purpose. Okay, so at the moment it might not be as abundant, it might not be as wide in scope as I would like it to be. Well, that's cool. So then the next question just becomes, how can I reach more people? How can I be paid more abundantly? How can I do this? So, in our experience at the moment, with the coronavirus, so we're a live event company, and we love what we do, and we, like you, we love to connect face to face. And now all of a sudden we can't do it in that way. So instead of it being that roadblock of, oh, I can't do what I want to do, it just becomes, how can I continue delivering what I love inside this restriction? And one of the things that I think is really cool, it's actually one of the archetypes in the system that I've created in the 22 archetypes, and that is that restrictions concentrate flow. But most people think restrictions stop them. But in fact, there's not a single thing that's ever been created on this earth where there wasn't some restriction. So if we look at, say, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, it's one of the most famous paintings on the whole of the earth, or the statue of David, any of these remarkable pieces of art. Well, there was a massive restriction. There's a block of marble, or there's just, a canvas with some paint.
Yes.
So this is a massive restriction. Anytime there's a restriction, human beings, because we're adaptable creatures, we then have to adapt and create something new to cope with that restriction. And all creativity is simply an adaptation process to restriction.
I love that. And I wonder, and I love that you say that, because in my meditation at the moment, the word that keeps coming up for me is focus. That real focus. And I even visualize like I need to get that word into the meditation room so it's there. And I agree with you. I think there's at the moment that people are going, well, out of the bullshit and what really matters. I wonder then though, what I've experienced myself is then you say, no, I need to concentrate and focus. And yet the old voice of what I should be doing, or like the self-doubt, the parent voice, whoever, still the voices of the past still creep in and create distraction. How do we deal with those?
Yes, well, there's two aspects of dealing with those. The first aspect is just to understand that anyone who did anything of any kind of significance or greatness on a small scale or on a large scale, they all had to trust that what inspired them was what they needed to focus on. And that it is focusing on what inspires us that is, because inspire means in spirit, is how we bring the divine into manifestation on the earth. Really that's the symbolism of the virgin birth. That we are here as a human being and it's a seed of divinity that comes down into us that we're inspired by. What inspires you will be different than what inspires somebody else. But it's focusing on that inspiration and creating that, which will allow us to create anything of greatness. When I wrote my first book, I was like, when I finish everything I have to do, then I'll write my, in the time I've got left, I'll write my book. And so in 6 years, I've written one chapter because we never finish the things that we're meant to do. Then I suddenly realised it because I was doing a lot of work on the archetypes, and I suddenly understood the hidden wisdom in this archetype. And it was like the moment I'm inspired, I am going to just drop everything and do what I'm inspired by. I'm just going to do that. And if I wake up in the morning and I'm inspired by my book, I'm going to do writing that first, and then I will do whatever else I need to do. And I'm going to trust it will all fit in when I do that. I finished that book in 6 months and wrote all the other chapters in 6 months, and I still got more success in my business than I had before. Because when you're inspired, you get filled with energy and you have more energy to do all the other tasks you have to do.
Yeah.
So just knowing that and being able to trust in that is really, really important. And then the second thing that's super important is to clear out some of those voices. Now, those voices are really likely to be influenced by mum and dad.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a process like matrix therapy's negative influence clearing, or masculine and feminine coaching, which is, a process that we do, or, and that you do in coaching, clearing out those voices. Because when you're a child, you can be totally interested and inspired by something, and your parents come along and go, have you done your homework? Or, it's dinner time.
Yeah.
And as a child, you have to stop what you're doing and do what the adult says. And we carry on that programming into adulthood when we're actually free to do whatever we want. So clearing away that really helps with the focus. So I think, these are two aspects of achieving success, love and happiness, is clearing away the things that stop us and focusing on where we're meant to go as two prongs of the same pathway forward. It's very, very powerful, I think, to do both.
Yeah, I love that. In the 8 principles of achievement, love and success, you do say in chapter 1 and 2, you speak about the principle of energy and the principle of concentration. So that's sort of what we've discussed now, having the energy, feeling the inspiration, and then focusing on where you want to go. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, if you want success, love and happiness, you need to focus on what you're inspired by. If you just want success, it is possible to focus on things that don't inspire you and use discipline and self-flagellation to make yourself do something. And, you know, it is possible to have success in that way, but you won't be happy. And you won't have the time and energy to connect with your loved ones either, because you'll just be grumpy all the time because you're using force to get yourself to do what you want. Whereas when you focus on what inspires you, there's a self-generating energy that happens because you're opening yourself wider and wider to the energy of spirit, even if that spirit is just, you know, it doesn't even have to be something from beyond. It can just be, you know, the spirit of enjoyment, the spirit of connecting, the spirit of, you know, it can just be purely psychological spirit. It doesn't, you know, if you don't believe in anything spiritual, it doesn't matter. But if you do believe in something spiritual, doing what inspires you is how spirit is invited into you. And spirit doesn't know fatigue. You know, the physical body does, but spirit isn't limited by the physical. So when you're inspired, you feel that endless sense of energy. I mean, obviously, at some point you have to make sure you're looking after the body as well. But I know, because I had chronic fatigue for years and years. And yet during that time, I ran my business because I was inspired by it. And when I was inspired, I had this endless energy. Then when I stopped teaching that day, I'd be really tired. And when the course was over, I'd really have to recover. But I was amazed that the energy was available to me, even though it shouldn't have been. Even though friends of mine who did work that wasn't inspiring to them were really, really unwell with really similar, set of circumstances as to what I had. But I was always able because I did what I loved. Yeah.
I wonder then, how do we, especially in this time, stop and listen in? How do we stop and listen in? I mean, that's really important because even now with this opportunity to slow down, you know, there is that frenzy and panic to get things online, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we open ourselves up to that guidance?
Yes, I've just developed a process like really recently, and I call it law, because I just wanted something really simple that people could apply instantly. And it's the L stands for listening, the A stands for acceptance, the W stands for welcome, and then there's another W that stands for wisdom. And I think you're right. What happens is that when people are already depleted with their adrenals, the adrenal dysfunction has 3 levels. You know, you have adrenal fatigue. That's where you're just tired. You know, you did an all-nighter or you stayed up late at night and the next day you're tired. So that's just adrenal fatigue. But if you're fatigued for too long, the adrenals have a different process of what they do. And the next process is a bit counterintuitive, because the more depleted your adrenals are, the more manic you become. Because the adrenals think, oh my God, we're being chased by a lion and there's so many lions and we can't stop, because if we stop, we're going to get eaten. And so suddenly you can't stop. You're tired, but you're wired. It's not easy to sleep. And in that process, the body has this sense of, oh my God, we're under attack all the time. So it doesn't want to stop. And it feeds, it becomes very addictive and it feeds itself. Because if we do stop, we will feel tired.
Okay.
Yeah, but the trouble is, if we stay in adrenal exhaustion for too long, you can get to adrenal burnout. And if you get to adrenal burnout, it's not easy to recover. And so I say to people, it's a little bit like you're on a horse and this horse is being frightened by something and it's running, but it's running towards a cliff. If it's running towards a cliff, you as the rider are going to do whatever you can to pull that horse up.
Sure, damn right.
Yeah. And, turn its direction, and then you're going to try and calm it. You're going to do your best to calm it down. And I say try actually consciously here, because it's not easy to do this, but you do need to. You need to calm it down and you need to stop it. And after a while, it will then just drop its head and go, and then it'll be done, you know, and then it can eat some grass and it can recover. And that's really important, because then we move into normal adrenal function, where we can have long-term focus, we can strategize properly, we don't get caught up in get-rich-quick things. We really are able to analyze what will be the best priority for me in the future. So we do need to go through this process, but what it's important for people to understand is that when they do that, and maybe they have an afternoon sleep or something, they'll wake up really tired. And this is a sign that you have been in adrenal exhaustion. And that's all right, because the adrenals are switched off so that you can replenish. So that, like, oh my gosh, hit by a bus type of feeling is good, because you're like, whoa, lucky me. I pulled myself up before I, you know, jumped off the cliff, you know?
Yeah.
So that's actually good. So just let yourself be tired. Don't do very much. And then you have another good sleep and another good sleep. And if you haven't been in adrenal exhaustion for too long, 2, 3, 4 days, and you'll be out of it into normal adrenal function, and you'll be so much more productive. You'll make up the productivity of those 4 days so easily and so quickly, because you will really truly be focusing on what's important, instead of running and reacting to every tiny little thing that's coming in at you, or jumping on the bandwagon of something else and something else and something else to rescue you from this attack. And so that's a really important thing for people to understand. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's just such a great explanation. Thank you, and so relevant for people to hear. I feel, because because there is a glorification of busy in our society. I do feel that, and I also think now is the time for us to start listening to our body, listening to our souls, listening to ourselves, and checking in and making that change. And simply by having the education of what's going on really does help, right?
It does, because people have that rest and they feel really tired and they don't even feel good. Sometimes you can even feel a bit depressed at that time, and then they get scared of it, and so then they don't rest.
Yes.
And then they push themselves too much. And I think you're right. This is the time to take a bit of a break and then look rationally and logically, as well as creatively and inspiringly, at what is the best thing for me to focus on next. Because really it is this manic behaviour that the whole world's been engaged in, which is the whole reason for coronavirus anyway, you know, not looking after our environment, not looking after animals, you know, just taking advantage, feeling like we can take whatever we want without any consequences, and then treating our own body, this animal we've got here, this beautiful, you know, miracle of creation, this pet really we've got here, and driving it in the same way, ravishing it in the way that we ravish nature. You know, there's consequences.
Totally consequences. And I just want to quickly touch on this. I did, in my investigation of the feminine and partnership economy instead of predatory capitalist economy, I came across a woman, I think she calls it imperial languaging. And I know this is really, language is a big thing in NLP and Matrix and everything. And she talks about how humans have he and her, or he or she, but anything that doesn't have that pronoun has an it, and everything that is it then doesn't seem to have a usefulness in our economy, and therefore can be exploited. So animals, earth, etc., it's not a he or she, it's an it. You know,
not in English anyway.
Yeah, in English, totally, right? Totally. And also, like, consequentially, like, English seems to be quite a predominant language. And also, if we look at the world power, it's predominantly English, right? So, yeah, and that's how we need to start paying attention to those labels and language we're giving ourselves, our environments, and everything around us, to not discredit things for being irrelevant, and not to measure things by its usefulness, right? That's what it is. That's what predatory economy is. Like, if it's not useful, and so minority groups, animals, environment, not that useful, ditch, right? So I just think that's really, what do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I think that's really true. I just feel that, when we look at masculine and feminine, every human being, whether they're male or female, has a masculine and feminine within, because it takes some, sperm and an ovum to make us. Even if you have gay parents, a sperm and an ovum makes a human being. And so there's, all of us have masculine and feminine within. But even in women, the masculine has become glorified and the feminine hasn't. And when we look at the feminine as receptive, as rest, as all of these things, we see pretty much just about everything that is feminine has been discredited, such as sleep, for instance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sleep is a feminine, quality. We go unconscious. The unconscious mind is feminine. So, we close our eyes, we go into the unconscious. But exactly like you're saying, in this sort of patriarchal-driven society and language and lexicon, there's this sense that sleep is something that can be sacrificed, like let's get on with the productivity out in the world, the projective aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is there's massive dysfunction that happens in human behaviour, let alone productivity.
Yeah.
When people don't get enough sleep. There's all these things that happen in the hidden, in the mystery, that is essential to our waking state that can't happen without sleep. Somebody who just has 3 true days without sleep, without even micro sleeps, have been truly kept awake just for 3 days, start hallucinating. Like, it just general mental health, mental stability is affected by that. And yet even women are sacrificing sleep. Nature, time out, stillness, sitting down and eating, nurturing the self, getting a massage, all of these feminine, archetypally feminine qualities have been, I'll do that when I get time, when I've finished all the things I have to do in this disciplined way. And we're suffering because of that. And our healing will be in that. But many, many people are afraid of it. They're just totally afraid of the unknown, the uncontrollable, the dark, the mystery. And that's actually where all our grace and all our healing resides. So we really need to make friends with that aspect of ourselves.
Yeah. And what I also discovered is that because as we said before, I found that when I started delving into the concept of feminine, or the not even the concept, the energies of feminine, I didn't know what that was. I mean, I looked at it from a traditional point of view, and I was looking at some of the information on your website about the feminine and the masculine coaching, and I have this idea of what a traditional woman should be. Of course, associating feminine with woman, first of all. I mean, that's really fallacy number one, or false premise number one. And two, looking at it as what a woman should be. And then I started reading a bit more. People have looked into ancient texts and what, feminine was in the past, and looking at the guru I follow, and really understanding it is the aesthetic side of life, the artistic, the beautiful, the flow side of life. And yet, because we don't know, first of all, what feminine is, we don't understand what it truly is. So how could we encompass that to then lead in the feminine? So this is really what this is all about, is how do we educate what feminine is? And then when the education comes, the mistrust may drop, and people may be more receptive to it. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but that's sort of how I've seen things happen in the past, and that's how I feel spirituality has become more mainstream, because there's more understanding. It's in a language that people understand. It's not this mystical Eastern stuff that some Indian dude does over there, right?
Totally. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I once saw an interview of Hillary Clinton and Julia Gillard together, and they were talking about, the incredible attack on women in leadership, and this idea that, it's okay to be a prominent woman so long as you are in what was traditionally a feminine role. So if you're the first wife, then it's okay for you to be prominent and you have a lot of popularity. But if you deign to want to have the top job of being president, then we're going to rip you down. And this is very interesting because a lot of people go, oh, well, there's no problem because you see all these prominent women, but what are the roles that they're in? And I think this is where it's really important to see the distinction between archetypal and stereotype. And to even have this language really allows us to understand that there are distinctive differences between the masculine and the feminine, but these don't have to be the stereotype. So when we look at a stereotype, it comes from the word stereo, which is a printing press, where they put the metal letters and then it would be printed. So if there was a mistake, that mistake would be repeated over and over and over and over again in a printed word everywhere. And that's where the word stereotype comes.
Oh, wow, really? That's so interesting.
Yeah, so then we have something like, the 1950s housewife, the patriarchal father figure. So in a way, it's a mistaken concept, but it's been repeated so much that it's become common. And that's very different from an archetype. The word arch means best, universal, first, umbrella, and type meaning symbol or example of. And so an archetype is the best example of something. And that's very different from a stereotype, which could be a very disempowered example of something. So we talk about the stereotype as being a shadow and the archetype as being the light expression. So when we look at that, archetypally, mother would be something that incorporates the concepts of Mother Earth, but also incorporates concepts of the feminine that we see in the animal kingdom, as well as incorporating concepts of the feminine, in women throughout history in a positive way. So, then you've got things like nurture and creativity and strength, because Mother Earth is also strong. You've also got the concept that, if you step over the boundaries too many times, then you have to be stopped.
Yes.
Whereas when we look at the 1950s stereotype of the feminine, there is no boundary. There's just acceptance of everything. But, in Mother Earth, there's certainly boundaries. And just look at a lioness.
Totally. And even a friend of mine, she was saying she was reading a book on how the West came to be. And she was saying that in the past, wealthy men often would relieve themselves on children and women, the vulnerable. And so a movement came in to say, protect yourself, protect your own sexuality. It's not there for the taking. You have a right to say no. And then the church got involved on that and then just took it to the absolute extreme to when sexuality is a bad thing, etc. But it's just interesting. And this is why I love looking at these concepts and why I encourage the audience to do so is knowing where things stem from, understanding the stereotype, understanding the marketing, understanding the origins of something that we do is really important, because then we can understand it and we can go, well, we can deconstruct that and understand that's not our truth. That's the construct that's followed through. And so it's really important to stop being curious about our belief systems, about everything. I mean, for me, I say question everything.
Absolutely. I think this is so important because, in NLP, we talk about how everything is context dependent. And it's so true. So how can one understand the context of what we're experiencing today without understanding the history that created that context? And, it's really important. And also, too, we have this belief that, that history is one line of progression, but it's not. There's been whole cycles. I mean, in the book, The Introduction of the Greeks by Kitto, he talks about how before people had worked out that babies came from, a man and a woman making love, because, such a big time difference between that act and 9 months later a baby comes. So there was a point in history where people hadn't connected those two things. And so in Greek culture before that, all hereditary went through the woman. They just thought that women just spontaneously, gave birth to things.
Amazing.
They didn't really understand that there was a masculine component in that. And so at that time, women were the powerful. So this is long before Greek civilization, but, in the ancient tribes that lived around the Greek islands and the Greek mainland. But then once it was sort of thought, it's about the two making love, it stopped being about the two making love. It became the man has it all and he just plants the seed. The woman's just, So, all of these things are just really fascinating and help us understand the complexity of the different feelings and meanings and aspects that we have. And when it stops being unconscious, becomes conscious, we can then choose what parts we like and what we don't. And also just knowing that lots of aspects of history, were hidden, weren't explained. I remember going to university and studying English literature, and there was a lunchtime seminar. And in that lunchtime seminar, a woman talked about the most popular playwright of the time in the Reformation, and it was a woman. And yet in the normal part of the syllabus, we had never heard of her, we'd never studied her and hadn't read a single one of her plays. And yet at the time, she was the most popular playwright and her name was Afra Ben. And then I was like, well, how come? This is incredible. And so I started to sort of do a lot more research into it. And, even a book, the novel was created by women, for women originally. And yet at university, we pretty much, apart from the Austens and the Brontes, we pretty much didn't study a single female writer.
Yeah.
So, we do need to sort of look at, without getting into conspiracy theories or anything like that, but just, look at people who conquer have an agenda and that it doesn't reflect the reality of what was going on or what was happening. There's a lot of powerful women in history who had an incredible impact on our world, and we do actually have to seek them out and find them.
Oh, yeah, because they were all written, there's been proof that women have been written out of the Bible, out of history books, and it's really interesting. And I love what you just said, conspiracy theories aside, just go and seek it for whatever your intention is. I mean, for me, it's about finding out the wealth of wisdom from women of the past, that I feel I've been denied only because of the education system, right? I want to come back to the vision thing. I just love this conversation so much. And I just want to concentrate now on, because now we want to focus on creating the new. And so, we touched on how to define the vision. And I want to talk about creating the new for ourselves, because I feel often as coaches, once again, I speak for myself and I assume other people are experiencing the same thing. So I'm going to be general here. But there's often a consensus that goes, I want to save the world. No, I want to save the world. And I'm going to do that through coaching. And my premises now is come back to your truth, save your own truth, live by example, and the world will change. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So we articulated the vision before, and I noticed then step 2 is, you said, allow it to ferment in the unconscious mind. So I would imagine that would just mean that we decide what we want to create, acknowledge what's already been created, and then do we just walk away and let it fester for a while, or what do we do there?
Maybe ferment.
Ferment, don't fester. Oh, okay. I hear you.
That's terrific. Yes. So I think sometimes people go, okay, I've got this idea. Now I've got to get it down straight away, and I'm going to know exactly what it is straight away, or it's of no value, and I've kind of failed in my creative process. But all creativity has a gestation period. So when you have the idea and then you decide, yes, this is the idea I'm going to focus on, that is like planting a seed in the unconscious mind, or a sperm, if you like.
I do like it.
Yeah. So just being aware that it does need a little bit of that dark time in that fallow ground. And that doesn't always have to be a very long time. So say I want to write a blog. So I might have a whole bunch of ideas of different blogs I want to write about. And then I might decide, this is the blog I'm going to write about. And I might have some ideas already because I've already got some ideas and I'll write them all out. But then I'll go for a walk or have a shower or, do something else and just let that be there, because the unconscious mind now is creating a whole heap of neural pathways. It's collecting a whole heap of information. So if you think of the unconscious mind as like, a librarian, and she's out the front and she goes, oh, so what book do you want? Oh, okay. And then she nicks behind and she goes down to, the stacks or whatever, and she starts collecting all of these books for you. And then she comes out and she goes, oh, you're interested in this subject, a step-by-step way to creativity. Well, here you go. Here's all this information I've collected from the library that our unconscious mind is, this enormous library, and she's the librarian and she's gone. So, if we don't give her any time to find those books, then we might find ourselves with a lack of information to write out. But it doesn't have to be long. A lot of people might use that as an excuse for hours.
Good old procrastination.
Yeah. And if you leave it for too long, the unconscious mind's like, I've got a lot of other customers here who are I've got those books out for you and you don't even want to take them. Well, there's other people who want them. So, and the other people in this case is just other things you're demanding of her,
Yeah, I love it. And then you say another step is to restart creating fun, outrageous idea. Don't let the logical brain kick in. Just like go and just create. And I feel this is the really nice feminine part here.
It is. And this part of creativity is so important because you need to free her to do outrageous ideas. And, this can come in many forms. It might be a whole heap of brainstorming about all the different things. It could be just some automatic writing. We're just writing out things and just doing our best not to dismiss an idea because, that wouldn't work with my audience. Don't worry about any of that yet. There'll come a point for that. I'm not saying that that's not important, but it's not part of the creative process. So, you just write down anything. You write out a whole heap of stuff. And then the next step is to edit, work out what's relevant to your audience. But if you try and edit before you've given birth, then you'll stop the birthing process and everything gets stuck. So it's just a little bit of like, can you imagine a woman there and she's giving birth to a baby and somebody's going, oh, no, not that. No, I don't like that. How much noise are you making? And, oh, my goodness me, and by the way, that's not the right baby. You should be giving birth to something else. Well, that would just be, how can anybody give birth? It's like that, what she just needs is a handheld. Well, she goes through the birthing process. And some birthing processes are much easier than others. Sometimes the baby just comes out in a really short period of time. It's really easy. Other times it's not as easy. But what she needs is some support and some hand-holding and, oh, my God, you're doing amazingly. Not, oh, wow, that's, you're not doing it right. We just need to remember that when we're writing out, this is not the time to criticise, to edit. No writing happens the first draft. What you end up with is the product of rewriting. The first draft should just be for you, just whatever you think, just get it out, just give birth to it.
Yeah, I love this. I love your analogies as well. I love this. I love your stories because I can so visually see this woman giving birth and someone else going, like, that's not right, man. Get back. I love that so much. And then, of course, the fourth step, as you said, build structure and action. And I wonder then, because how important experimentation is to building a vision. I mean, you've built such a successful business and a successful life and, and you've influenced so many wonderful people. How important was experimentation in that process for you?
Yes, well, for me, I do that creative process and I'm quite happy and totally fine that that is a messy process. And so, you know, I will give birth to that, and then, you know, then I will sort of work out which part of that, you know, is appropriate for where, and, you know, and then I present it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so when you're going to present in that way, it's just remembering this thing is not fully formed yet. So you're not just going to throw it out to the wolves. You know, you're not just going to throw that out to anybody in the public. When I've created something and I'm experimenting with it, I might have a client, for instance, say when I created the Your Quest process, which is a part of our Passion and Purpose program, when I created that process, the first person I went to was my PA. And I said to her, you know, I've created this new process. I think it's really cool. Would you be happy to experiment with me with it? And she was like, oh, I'd love it. And I knew her personality. So I picked somebody who was fine with that kind of thing. I wouldn't have picked some uptight person who needs everything to be in control and you know, is afraid. I'm going to pick someone who's open and loves me and my ideas. That's the person I'm first going to share, you know, the naked baby with.
They might pee on it. Yeah,
exactly. So that's who I did it with first, and she loved it, and she had an amazing result from it. And so, in fact, you know, I won't go into that. I was going to now everyone will be like, what was it?
I know they will. They'll be like, tell us now.
And she's happy for me to share that. She was having some issues, you know, with her intimacy with her husband at that time. And we did this process. And she went home and had a lovely time. She was pregnant instantly.
Oh my God, Pip, you know, everyone's going to go send me some of that love juice process. I really want it. This is a perfect cliffhanger to get people to contact you. I love it.
Yeah. And anyway, but, you know, the thing was that she didn't really want, you know, she wasn't planning to be
that was not part of the idea.
You know, it had been quite a long time that it would just suddenly happen with one night.
Wow.
And she came back to me, like when she realised, and she was like, do you realise I'm pregnant and it's your fault? I said, I didn't say just go home without any protection, you know. And she goes, well, it's still your fault, so you have to be godmother. So anyway.
Oh my God, it's such a cool story.
Yeah. But anyway, so that aside. But then the next people I experimented with was some coaching clients who had done a lot of my processes, were really used to them and wanted something different, you know. So I said to them, you know, would you like to experiment with this very powerful process?
Warning.
Something you don't want to have happen. And so they did, and they loved it. And then I picked a small group of people who had done a lot of my other programs, and then they did it and they loved it. And then I just bigger and bigger people, and now, you know, we've had really big groups of people doing that process. So this is the thing, you know, when you first put something out into the world, remember it's only young. So put it with people you trust. Then when it's got a bit older and you can dress it in nice clothes and things like that, then it can go to kindy, you know, and then it can go to primary school, and then it can go to high school, and then it can go out in the world. So don't just throw your experimentation out when you have no idea how people will respond to it. Just experiment in this controlled, safe manner, and make sure your creation is robust enough to cope with the world.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel that's so relevant, and what I take from that as well is it's a long game. You know, I feel once again there's this idea of the instant success and and so I'm so careful not to put words into people's mouths, but I do sort of notice from media and what's out there is that instant gratification. We always see the end product of the person being successful, and yet fail to see the 20 years it's taken them to get there, like yourself, right? And so it's just really important to acknowledge that.
Yes, it is. And at the same time, I just want you to remember that I created matrix therapies, you know, only a few months after I finished my NLP training. But matrix therapies was still based on my previous experience and work. And this is something really important to remember. it's another actual archetypal concept that we have, and that is that, you know, when you are creating something new, don't throw away all your previous experience as if it's irrelevant to your new offering. Some of it will be chaff that you want to get rid of, you never want to have again. But some of it will be, you know, harvested seeds that are really precious, that you want to be part of where you're going. So your past experience creates your reputation, it creates a whole heap of experience with people, and all of this can inform your coaching business, it can inform your training business, it can inform, you know, your online program, it can inform all of these things. So yes, you know, we've got this experimentation, but even this experimentation can happen pretty quickly. Like, you know, your quest was out in the first, you know, small courses within only a few months. And so, you know, there are things that can go out. We just want to take them through the process, but you can shorten the process. But what happens for most people is when they're trying to give birth, they're already thinking that the moment I give birth to this, it has to go straight out into the world. Mm-hmm. And that interferes with the birthing process. It's just like, no, here we are just giving birth to whatever. Nobody ever has to see that.
Yeah.
You know, then we take it through a process, and some of those things will still never be seen, but some of it will continue along. And that can be surprisingly fast, but we don't want to skip the steps.
So it's about following the process.
Yeah, you can shorten the time frame.
Okay.
But you want to make sure you do all the steps. You know, it's like building a house.
Yeah.
You know, some houses can be built faster than others. Some houses are going to have multi-rooms. Other houses are just going to be, you know, a one bedroom, you know?
Yeah.
You know, but each house still has to have the foundation.
Yes.
And then it needs to be built. But they can be built out of different materials, and different materials require different time as well.
I love those analogies. You give me such great analogies. I'm like, I can totally get that. Like, I can totally get that. Yeah, different houses, different materials, different times. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. You know, if I'm going to build a container house, you know, maybe that's my online program. Yeah. You know, it will be much faster than building, you know, an entire suite of a movement of coaching. You know, that's a very different. No, that's castle. You know.
Yes.
But, you know, my container and my container might be what I live in whilst I build the castle. That's certainly what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you don't have to stay in the container for too long before you're in a cottage, and then, you know. Yeah. Then it builds. So, yeah. But the container is still going to need, you know, unfortunately, the container is quite heavy, so that's but it's still going to need somewhere. You don't want to put it into quicksand. It's still going to need some stability. It's still going to need probably a concrete block at the least, and that concrete block has to be built on land that is stable. So we just have to be realistic.
Yes. Okay. And I hear that, because I like to sit in the idealistic space, and I constantly remind myself to come back and deal with what's in front of me as well. Because, you know, the things like finances, processes, all of those things have to be looked at in order to reach the ideal. And I've experienced times where I've sat in the ideal and ignored the reality, and the reality has caught up with me and bitten me on the ass.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and I think this is where we want to have the appropriate thinking for the appropriate stage. But when we're in the ideas phase, it's super appropriate to be idealistic, because those ideas, there's no danger, there's no financial biting in the idea phase. So, you know, you can have ideas that are really big, and you can have your dreams, and you can put them all on your vision board, and, you know, you can have that as big and as extraordinary as you like. But once you pick an idea to focus on right now, to bring it into the world, to go through the birthing process, then you've got to think about, okay, you know, how, you know, if we're looking at it as a birthing process, yeah, okay, so what kind of baby am I going to give birth to? Yeah, if I'm pretty tired and, and I've only got a small space here, then I just want to pick something that I can, plant in there that I can give birth to relatively easily and get that into the world. And then that can start to nourish me whilst then I work on the next idea. So when I'm in the ideals phase, we don't want realism in that room. We just want wonderful, fabulous ideas. But when I'm picking which idea I'm going to focus on, I might need a little bit of reality there to pick the right idea for the context I find myself in right now. Pluck that, put that in, and then manifest that and let it nourish you. And once you've got a bit of nourishment, then this is healthier, it's bigger, and then we can go for the next one through the process. So it's really about which step am I at, and if I'm here at the giving birth time, this is not the time for me to be super idealistic. It's about just, how can I just give birth to it right now in a time frame?
Yes.
So, the idea might be to have a best-selling, extraordinary novel. Yeah, well, that's really cool, but maybe you need some cash flow right now. So right now, I'm going to pick something that's going to be similar to that book that I'll do on the way. So it'll be similar. Just going to create a free online PDF offering that's going to help me collect, emails for my database. And the cool thing about that is, one, it's going to create a structure that my best-selling book will be based on, but it will be something that can go out and give birth to really quickly and easily now, that's going to nourish me with contacts and things. And whilst I'm then going ahead and creating my bigger book, then I'll already have an email base to market it to when I want to sell it. But don't pick an idea that's got nothing to do with your book, nothing to do with something you're not inspired by. Just pick a smaller piece of what you're inspired by.
Wow, I love that so much. Wow, that's just such great pearls of wisdom, I think, especially for us creating what we want to, in this creation stage. And I know what I particularly love about that is you say, pick something that relates to the ideal, not something totally off the wall. I feel for me there's sometimes been a disconnect where I feel I've had to do something that's not in line with the ideal, and that's really caused a lot of personal conflict within myself and that.
Yes. And then it's like picking, if I do have to do something, like one time we picked the wrong bookkeeper, right? And then I had to redo all the books because even a new bookkeeper, the mess was so huge they couldn't do it. So it's like, okay, I've got to do something. It's not within my comfort zone. It's not within my expertise. Certainly not inspiring to me. But how can I do that fits within as much as possible the things that I love? Well, I love connecting with people like you do. And I also love something that is of beauty. So I connected with someone who I really enjoyed her company. And she also did Xero. And Xero is a very beautiful, clean-looking system. I think it's beautiful of accounting systems, which
if they can be beautiful.
Yes. And so what I did was then I sifted through this thing that I wouldn't normally want to do with someone I enjoyed, using a system that I thought was beautiful. So even in things that we have to do, we can still find ways of doing it that fit more with things that we enjoy. So, rather than knuckling down and disciplining myself to do it, it's like, what's a more beautiful, more fun way for me to do this? So even something I don't like to do can be done in a better way that suits me more.
Yeah, I love it. And what I really hear there is, in order to do that, I have to understand myself. I have to know myself. Archetypally, I have to know what triggers me, what I find fun, and that's what you help people with. And really the greatest joy in life is for me getting to know myself better so I can create and do things in a way that I enjoy more. And, even if it's things that don't inspire me, like you said, accounting, same thing. But finding ways to do it in a way that is okay, that still gives me what I need, the connection, the fun, et cetera, et cetera. I just, wow, like what an impactful and knowledgeable and practical discussion to have with you. I just have found it so, your knowledge and your inspiration and your joy, it just comes through, like it shines through you. I just love that. And I just, I mean, people will hear this in the podcast, they'll see the video too. And when you do see the video on the redhottruth.com, you will see how Pip shines and how knowledgeable she is and how she truly does love what she does. And so I feel that, you know, if you're going to go on that journey of self-discovery, if you're not already there, but if you want to take that deeper, and there's always deeper and juicier and more delicious to go, then come into Pip, because going to someone who loves it, I mean, that energy is really explosive, right? Mm-hmm. And so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. So how can the audience get hold of you?
Yes, well, the best thing is just to simply go to the website. So my website's under my name, Pip Mckay, PIPMCKAY.com.au. And one of the things I've left up there for the readers, I'm going to be for your viewers, I'm going to be taking it down very soon. But I've put up there a free download of my best-selling book, The 8 Principles of Achievement, Love and Happiness. And it goes through the archetypes that we've been talking about in a lot more detail. And it will give them a lot more information about that. And that's also a way we can stay connected. So if people want, it's like, it's the PDF of the whole book, and people can really benefit from all those details. So if they're interested, just, go to the website and they can download that book immediately.
Yes, and I have downloaded that book myself, and I started reading it, and it is full of wealth of information and just such a beautiful book. So thank you for that gift. I mean, what a gift to give away a whole beautiful book. Thank you for that.
It's my pleasure, Petra, and thank you. I just feel like you are so inspiring and you're out there, and I really do think that you're doing your passion and purpose right there, and I just look forward to it blossoming, as you said, even more. It's just fabulous.
Well, I've got one more question, which I love to ask all of my guests, is what is your red hot truth and how are you living it?
Well, my red hot truth is that you absolutely can make money doing what you love in a way that is abundant and balanced. And I know that to be true because I've done that in my own life, and I've helped hundreds and hundreds of other people do that in theirs. It's just a matter of finding a creative way to be able to navigate through the challenges or the blocks that people find. And it is absolutely possible to let go of anything from the past and to achieve what you want in the future.
Amen, sister. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, hug, virtual hugs. I always say in my newsletters, I go big hugs and sloppy kisses. Maybe it's fist pump. Thank you so much, Pip. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Petra. See you.
Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for being here with us at the Red Hot Truth podcast. If you loved it as much as we did, please download this episode, share it with your friends, and remember to subscribe. Your time to shine is now. See you next time. Ciao, Bella.